Here we are again. If you've just watched our One Division video, you'll notice we've almost not moved. That'll be because there was about 3 seconds gap between me just hitting a button twice. So, this one, though, very different. We're going to talk about Raya and the Last Dragon. Raya? How do they pronounce it in the film?
I think it's Raya.
Was it Raya?
Yeah.
Because I've been calling it Raya, but then they called her something at one point, and I thought, I've been saying it wrong.
Is it Raya?
Was it Raya? Raya and the Last? Might be Raya, actually.
I want to say Raya.
Yeah.
I also want to point out, especially if you did watch the last One Division, guess who didn't fuck up the intro this time?
Oh, yeah. I got my words out. Shouldn't be that excited. Anyway, so we've watched Raya and the Last Dragon this afternoon, and
I will say first of all,
okay,
and I'm going to get the negatives out of the way right now. First negative, it is absolutely Disney by numbers. Now that's an odd thing to say as a negative, and it's not a massive negative, but if you look at, say, something like Frozen, for example, which massively kind of took that Disney stereotype of true love and love at first sight and just turned it on its head and went, actually, realistically in real life, that's a load of bollocks. And, sort of the love of family.
Charming.
The love of family is as important or more important in some cases than that infatuation aspect. You're not going to get any of that. It was absolutely a by the numbers one, because linking into that, we were watching it, and I think pretty much in the first 5-10 minutes we went, well, that's going to happen, that's going to happen, and that's going to happen, and it absolutely did.
Yeah. There are no surprises in this movie. No. At no point will you go, unless you're possibly under 8, in which case you might.
Or don't read many stories, because, as I say, I've listed them as negatives, but the reality is they're actually really not, because what this essentially was is this was Disney by the numbers, and Disney by the numbers 9 times out of 10 is fucking solid.
Yeah,
for starters. And the reason why we could go, that's going to happen, that's going to happen, and that's going to happen, is because it was telling a very archetypal story.
Absolutely.
So
I wasn't sure if this was, because obviously they've taken actual folklore legends, fairy tales, etc. before, and existing novels and what have you, and done
put a spin on them.
And because Frozen is the Snow Queen, but it's nothing like the Snow Queen. The Little Mermaid is the Little Mermaid until the end, where it gets a happy ending and she doesn't turn into froth, which that's what happens in the book.
I know, I've read it.
Oh, okay, fine. I didn't know. When you looked at me, it was like, really?
No, I was like,
yeah,
because Disney.
Yeah, but which is fine, because Kay always gets a bit sort of like, oh, you've got to Disney ruining everything, and I'm like, I don't think of it as ruin it. I think of it as you've just got to balance your kid. If you make them watch The Little Mermaid when they're age appropriate, so don't do it. They're 4, they'll be traumatized. Do it when they're 7, and they can cope. You make them read the book. Go, actually, this is the original story. Disney made this 100 years later or whatever, And I think that's key. When you look at, a lot of the European fairy tales that made Disney what it is today.
They're bleak.
Yeah, your Snow White, your Cinderellas, and all the rest of it. You go back to a proper original, even before sort of like Hans Christian Andersen or Grimm brothers got their paws on them. The original folklore are their horror stories.
Well, and the reality is what I would class as most proper fairy tales, which sounds really elitist. I don't mean it, but stories that evoke the sense of fairy tales is probably a better way of putting it. Generally, at best, have bittersweet endings.
Yeah, completely.
And Stardust actually is a classic example of that, because the ending of the story that Neil Gaiman wrote in like the book, the short story, whatever it was, quite different to how the film version ends. Still hits all the same beats, but it isn't quite as nicely wrapped up in a tidy little...
Doesn't end with a lovely ditty by Gary Barlow. That's all I'm saying. But this, it doesn't appear to have been based on a particular story. It's just based on the kind of stories that come out of a particular part of Asia. So it's not China as I thought. It's more sort of Malaysian area, so it's more sort of Philippines, that kind of part of the world.
I think it's drawing from a lot of influences there, because especially when you look at the cast, because you've got Korea, because obviously you've got, and this is going to be really bad, but I'm shit with names at the best of times. But sort of her that played Rose.
Kelly Marie Tran.
Thank you. Who is obviously a Korean. You've got people like Sandra Oh doing sort of voice work.
Daniel Day Kim.
Yes, Benedict Wong.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean it has a very clear to a Western audience what we would take it as Asian influences, but I think it's not drawing from this is just China, this is just Japan.
Yeah, not like Mulan did.
No,
for example.
But to be fair, Mulan was set in a very sort of
specific,
fictitious, but it was still set in China.
Yeah, but Mulan existed before Disney. Do you know what I mean? So it's got that, and then obviously the style of dragon. It's not Game of Thrones dragon.
It's very Eastern Oriental dragon.
Yeah, they're long with
sinewy and snake-like rather than sort of
serpentine
reptilian
and fluffy, very fluffy.
Adorable.
I kept thinking of Falcor from the Neverending Story.
Yes,
that's what I kept thinking of.
Who I think is also kind of broadly based on Eastern dragons as opposed to Western.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he looks more like he belongs over the door of a Chinese takeaway. more than with Daenerys sat on his back. But
there's a film.
Isn't there though? It was a lovely story.
Yeah.
It was very heartwarming. It was very funny.
Oh, good God, yes.
Sisu, the main dragon, voiced by Aquafina.
Yep.
Who I...
Or Aquafina.
Aquafina?
Because it's written like awkward, but Aquafina.
Yeah. Whereas Aquafina, I've just made it sound like a tonic, haven't I? But but I didn't realise she was famous for doing a video on YouTube called My Vag. That's an interesting choice for Disney.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, no, I was looking her up afterwards.
But I know her from things like Ocean's 8.
Right.
Because she was she was obviously one of the main characters in that.
Never seen it.
She's popped up in... again, I haven't seen it, but it looks fascinating. I want to say it's actually in Chinese, but it's essentially a very sort of American Chinese sort of daughter, who I think is basically sort of Awkwafina, because I think Awkwafina is American Chinese.
Right.
Basically going back to visit sort of family in China, and it's all about family ties and about
what do we do, baby?
Yeah, but it's kind of because I think it's about her grandmother,
right?
And obviously, it's essentially about the differences between sort of how sort of Chinese sort of people kind of look at family.
This is really a vague bowl. Is this really an Oscar?
Possibly, because basically I think her grandmother is dying, and it's also about kind of that comparative study.
This is familiar
about how sort of Western, and obviously Awkwafina's kind of as the character is kind of sat in this really awkward place where she's kind of grown up and socialized as Western, but she's very much kind of also kind of not held back, but she still very much has that sense of I am a Chinese person who has grown up in America.
Yeah.
And it's kind of about, again, that conflict of cultures, and it's basically done, I think, through the kind of recounting of the story of her bond with her grandmother, who is dying and is being very Chinese about it, and kind of just like, it is what it is. And obviously Awkwafina's kind of, I think, being quite American about it, and being, why aren't you talking about this, and why aren't we grieving and all that sort of stuff.
So that does ring a bell.
Yeah.
She's also in the upcoming Marvel film.
Is she in Internals?
No. Shenzi and the Ten Rings, Banzai and the Ten, Ed and the Ten Rings. I've just gone through the hyenas from the Lion King. Shanghai? That's a city.
I was going to say Shang-Tzu, but that's a character from Mortal Kombat. I think it's Shang-Chi.
Tenko. She's going to come the up and coming Marvel version of Tenko. She's in that. Whatever it is in the Ten Rings, I can't remember the name of the title. She's in that.
I want to say Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi? Could be Shang-Chi. So she's in that, whatever it is.
I think it's like the film that would have been sort of broadly sort of stemming from like the Iron Fist Defenders type one. Yeah. Like kind of like the origin of that right. Iron Fist became.
Right, okay. She's in that. And she's hilarious in And the Last Dragon.
I love Awkwafina.
And they're going to sell a buttload of weird-ass armadillo toys off the back of this, aren't they?
And merchandising in general.
Yeah, voiced by Alan Tudyk.
Yes, Tuk Tuk.
Yeah, Tuk Tuk, which I thought was
weird. I remember those names, but ask me an actor's name, I'm just like,
Well, I just thought it was funny because she's travelling around on a tuk-tuk. And, of course, a tuk-tuk is that little golf cart thing that goes round, I think it's Japan. Those little, like one man in the front, two people in the back, almost like a milk float things. They're called tuk-tuks.
I thought they were rickshaws.
No, rickshaw is where you pull it along. These are motorised.
Okay.
These are like little bubble cars.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I didn't realise they were actually called tuk-tuks.
Yeah, they're tuk-tuks. And of course, she was riding around on a tuk-tuk. So I thought that was quite amusing. And there was a bit where I was a bit confused because it was almost like they just forgot about him for a couple of scenes and then he reappeared and got a big welcome back. It's towards the end, so I don't want to say too much and give too much away.
If you're watching this, spoilers.
Yeah, but
who are you talking about?
There was basically at the end when they sort of like everything's going to shit just before they have the final big showdowns at because all of the cities, basically this country is built over a river that is the exact shape of a dragon. So it's like hearts, talons, tail, spine, and fang. And when they go to Fang at the end to have like the final showdown to get the last piece of crystal, something I can't remember what happened. Something had happened, and I was like, "Oh, what happened to Tuk Tuk?" Like something caved in on a wall.
Oh yes.
And then they did the whole thing with the forest, and he just rolls out of nowhere, and they're like, "Yay, Tuk Tuk!" And I'm like, "You forgot him," because I was like,
I honestly can't say I noticed. So.
I noticed, and now you will. But yeah, it was a bit weird. It was a bit like they almost went, "Oh shit, we've animated him for a couple of scenes. Let's do a reunion." Who was animating Tuk Tuk this week? George. Oh, George has been off sick. He had coronavirus. Or something. I don't know what happened. It possibly was not like that at all.
We're doing a thing right now.
Well, I am. But it just really struck me. It was almost like we always used to do this in the Wizard of Oz. It was always like the amusing thing that when you do the Wizard of Oz on stage with a real dog, he comes out at the beginning for the audience to go and then you don't use the bastard dog again because it's too fucking tricky for most of your scenes to try and choreograph and have a dog. So it's always like, remember Toto? Like, I'll get you and your little dog too. Remember Toto? And then he comes along at the end to get put in the basket, before you leave the Emerald City. So the dog basically has two scenes, and the rest of the time is just not there. that's what this reminded me of. Like, remember Tuk Tuk?
Turns out no.
But it's a nice film.
Yeah, I would say as well. Again, animation is absolutely gorgeous.
Oh God, to die for, flawless. And I think you can see. I mean, obviously it was made to go into cinemas, and you can see where the 3D release would have been. You can absolutely, especially when the way the dragons move when you see any of the scenes with dragons. There's a lot of flashbacks to sort of like why the dragons no longer exist and stuff like that. And they are very colourful. And they run by essentially producing a puddle to step on, don't they? That's the only way I can describe it.
But
fly. That's how they fly. They kind of run through the air and little puddles of water appear under their feet to leap from one to the other. And I was looking at it going, oh, this is gorgeous. I could also see where it's going to tie into the parks, where the ride would come from, where there'll be a pavilion built in Epcot. I could see the whole... They've planned this all out and gone, right, how do we really maximise this and absolutely make the most money out of it?
Yeah.
But the weird thing about this is I don't know if we've just so got used to not going to the cinema, but I was watching it and going, don't know seeing this at the cinema would have been any massive benefit or difference. I didn't feel I was missing out. I sat on SO for the first time I watched it.
No, and I think, and this kind of would, because obviously a bit of backstory. Before I met Paul, who is, as those of you that know him who are watching this know, is a huge cinema nerd and would go to cinema to see everything, literally everything.
I've sat through so much shit.
And to be fair, you've worked in cinema, so
yeah,
it's almost like a progression of that. I was always very much now we've got the other cat joining us, so if the camera suddenly goes, you'll know why.
Be shadow.
But I, for the longest time, was never one who went to. I went to cinema as a kid, but I kind of got to the point where, unless it was like a huge special effects bonanza, so like your your End Games, your J.J. Abrams Star Trek type affairs, never felt like I was particularly missing out on like not seeing films at the cinema. And in a lot of cases would just go, yeah, I can't be bothered. So obviously, meeting Paul kind of massively dragged me out of that comfort zone. And I think we actually got to a point where it was very much that, yes, we were going to see movies at the cinema because it's the whole experience. And it's something that's largely been absent from my life. But yeah, absolutely. I think COVID came along and, we've all had to adjust. And suddenly, for me, it's kind of weird. It's like going back to how I used to be for the past 20, 30 years as far as the cinema went. And I'm not actually missing it as much as I thought I would.
I am.
I think I will when we start, getting MCU stuff. God forbid cinemas haven't opened by that stage. There's no reason why they shouldn't have it.
I think
fairness, but
if they haven't started properly opening, I've got no idea what's going on at the States at the minute. To be fair, I think this has opened in cinemas in the States, but because it was a whole released in theaters and to Disney Plus premium access simultaneously, and then arrives on Disney Plus unpremium access
in a few months' time. I see, yeah. Okay, so similar to Milan then.
3 months. So basically, when it would have hit,
or Mulan,
when it would have hit retail, basically. So I don't know. I don't quite know how. I mean, my perception is America isn't as closed as the UK is right now. But
and paying the price.
Yeah. Just sort your shit out because we might be ready to travel by June when we're fucking due to come out. So if the problem's your end, you'll hear from me multiple times. So
we all will.
Everyone will know. Everyone. It will basically be a case of just don't even talk to me on my birthday. Just don't.
Yay!
Just do not. Unless we come up with our other plan, which we talked about. Fingers crossed we could do that instead.
Well, fingers crossed we don't need to.
Well, there is that's the main. Hello. Thanks, Shad. I haven't got a wet nose. But there's a whole slate of put back films. Your James Bond. But I mean, Black Widow was supposed to be out
summertime?
This time last year?
Was it?
I think it was like April last year.
Actually, no, you're saying that now. I remember.
Yeah, I was looking at the slate of films that. So there's a load of films they've still managed to get ready because obviously they would have been in post production by the time COVID hit. So
so delayed, but they can work on them from home.
Yeah, so they can still kind of happen roughly when they were supposed to. There's a whole other bunch that are massively put back. So like Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yes,
is that what it's called? Is now this time next year rather than I think originally it was due out last autumn.
Yeah, because isn't Eternals next year as well?
Yeah. Anyway, so there's this kind of
later this year originally.
This weird kind of mix of delayed stuff where they couldn't film and backlog of stuff that they could film. So it's all kind of gone a bit higgledy-piggledy as far as releases go. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. And of course, if cinemas don't open, and there is an awful lot of theories that cinemas just won't. We've seen the last of them. They've gone. And I know Cineworld, last I read, was saying, well, when we reopen, we're only reopening half our cinemas and we are permanently closing the other half because this has killed us. We can't function. The overheads to run all of our cinemas. We're going to have to shut half. But I mean, there's like 2 in Newport, right? So just shut one of them. That's easily done. Just don't shut Spitty Park.
No, because
I don't want to go to Friars Walk.
And we don't want to go to Cardiff.
We really don't want to go to Cardiff. I will just get a showcase instead and save the arse like driving half as far. And yeah, I lost my train of thought completely.
Cinemas reopen.
Yeah, so it's if cinemas don't reopen, how's that work? If there's there's the rest of the world have got a movie business and the UK just suddenly hasn't. Doesn't bear thinking about really. And now depress myself.
Yeah. But I one thing I kind of going back to and the Last Dragon. I still think it's Raya. We'll have to watch it again at some point just to go,
Yeah.
oh, we were saying it wrong this whole time, or no, we were right. And again, this is, I think, another example of where Disney is learning from some of its previous missteps. And again, I think they demonstrate that really well with the live action of Mulan as well. But we kind of touched at the beginning about how this is very clearly influenced by that whole sort of Pacific sort of rim sort of set of cultures. It draws from Korean and Chinese and Japanese and Malaysian and all of that sort of melting pot of sort of mythology and styles and everything. And they actually basically have got a voice cast that mirrors that. They are drawing from Americo-Chinese, Korean, sort of Malaysian, lots of different sort of appropriate nationalities are being brought in to do the voices. It's not basically a bunch of white folk voicing non-white characters. So again, that's a really positive step. Also, again, disappointing that it's mid sort of 2021 and we're still having this conversation as, yes, that's a good thing, well done, it should literally be the standard, but it is showing that things are continuing to progress in the right direction. So long may that continue.
It's also not about casting a name per se.
Yeah,
because they've got it's a list of names that you go through and go, oh yeah, I know them.
Who?
But they haven't gone. Yeah, it's but I think that's something they kind of, thinking about it, that's something Disney have kind of done well pretty much always, I want to say, because I'm just running back through everything in my head. And when you look at, so you look at the Ice Age franchise, you've got big names. You look at Madagascar, it's 4 big A-list names. Well, they were possibly at the start of it, maybe not so much now. But you go The Little Mermaid. Who was famous in The Little Mermaid really before The Little Mermaid? Rene Auberjonois, who had a really small part as the chef, probably about it. Beauty and the Beast, same. Aladdin, pretty much. Do you know what I mean? You can go back over quite a long period for Disney, and they haven't massively gone stunt name to sell the film. I guess it's because they're Disney and they don't have to. The only time I'm just trying to think. So like Home on the Range, you had Roseanne, Judi Dench, Kathy Najimy, somebody I can't remember.
Possibly
as the 3 main cows, and Cuba Gooding Jr. as the horse. So the one time they did go all out of the names, the film was bloody awful. I mean, just terrible. Bolt, John Travolta and Miley Cyrus. But then Bolt's awesome and like my favourite Disney ever. So so they have.
That's possibly in spite of John Travolta rather than because of John Travolta.
Yeah, well, certainly in spite of Miley Cyrus. But then you look at, I'd say Pixar's probably gone with names more. In fact, Pixar generally has names, doesn't it? Thinking about it, but then
weirdly, Pixar also has a thing where it has it's you've always got John Ratzenberger doing a voice, and that's become a Pixar thing. It's like you're literally looking to see who is John Ratzenberger going to be doing the voice of in this Pixar movie, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think equally that, setting aside, I know there was huge controversy over Tina Fey being cast as, I forget the Soul's number. Was it 22? Or number 2, whichever soul it was.
2, wasn't it? Number 2, wasn't it?
Yes, because obviously you then had the whole optics of it's a white woman sorting out a black man's life sort of thing. Which obviously, if you've watched the movie, it's referring to the bit sort of further down when they've actually made it back to Earth. I personally don't necessarily agree with that because they do actually
I didn't see that at all.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest.
Plus, I think it's because they make a point of it being that what the sort of Soul 2, we'll call for the sake of argument, I'm probably getting the number completely wrong, makes a point of saying is that they are effectively genderless, raceless, they are energy beings.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I saw the character. So I got I didn't make any connection there.
But they even do the whole, why do you sound like a white woman in her sort of late 30s, early 40s, and it's like, because I found out this is the voice that irritates people the most.
Yeah.
They make a joke about it that it's absolutely Karen syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that there.
I wanted to rewatch Soul. Actually, that was so good.
Yeah, it was amazing. But I think that there is, and something I think has been a tendency to kind of do that sort of whitewashing with voice talent. So it's always, I think, for me, encouraging to see when they're not doing that and they're just going with the. It's similar to, if you've got a trans character, get a trans actor to play them.
There's plenty out there.
Yeah. If you've got a gay character, get a gay person to play them. If you've got a lesbian character, a bi character, blah 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 blah. You get the idea. And I think it's something that I think voice work is particularly prone to, because you don't have.
You could be anybody. Yeah. You're a voice. It doesn't matter.
You don't have the visual impression of if you're casting a black character, you generally need to have a black actor, because thank God we've moved away from the era of blackface for the most part. Looking at you, Raven. What the fuck were you thinking? But I digress. But I think a lot of people think you can get away with it with voice work, and that doesn't really work for me. But that was a little tangent.
No, I mean, within a vocal range, there are certain cadences that tend to lend themselves to some cultures and some like background. So, like, I'll use an accent as an example. It's very easy to spot a fake Scottish accent if it's not done well. There are people who aren't Scottish and can do a brilliant Scottish accent, but there are certain when you've got a genuine Scottish person, that's kind of where I'm going with that. So I think there are certain same with like the various New York accents and stuff. I think you often hear them done really badly. So there is a certain again cast like for like. I'm trying to think of a movie where someone does a really bad accent. Sean Connery is probably going to be the best example. Like, he never bothers.
He's a bad example because he doesn't.
Dick
bother.
Van Dyke in Mary Poppins.
Ooh.
There you go. I knew there'd be a really obvious one.
God blimey, Mary Poppins.
And I mean that's just become a thing, hasn't it? But yeah, I think there's enough people in the world that you can just cast like for like.
Frasier. And the Mancunian accents. Daphne and her mum.
I know. I can't try. What's the actress's name?
She's in Grace and Frankie.
Oh, the mum. No. I'm talking about. No, I'm talking. No, not the mum.
Oh,
actually, Daphne Moon.
Yes, I can't think of the actress.
I can't think of her name. Perry was the other one. Perry Roz.
Gilpin was Roz.
She was Roz. Oh God. Why? Anyway, her. I thought she genuinely was from Yorkshire, though. Is that not the case? I thought she had to like throw the accent a bit because they couldn't understand the word she was saying.
It's more her mum, which was just this weird.
I can't think. I can see. I mean, I can see her face. Obviously, 'cause like you say, she is in Grace and Frankie, where she does speak with a bit of a regional accent, but it's not Mancunian or Northern particularly.
It's kind of all over the shop.
Yeah.
But again, you kind of get. It was weirdly quite nicely or quite badly highlighted by US Drag Race this week with Rosé, who is very much a New York drag queen, but originally, and we're talking like way back when, comes from Scotland, but basically is a John Barrowman. I actually remembered his name this time. Is a John Barrowman character, because I was absolutely, again, not knowing a huge amount about John Barrowman before Captain Jack and still not really knowing a huge amount about him even since. Every time I've seen him, he's always talked in that very sort of like transatlantic accent of his. And then I saw a program where he was with his family.
Oh, was he with his sister, Carol?
No, his mum and dad, actually.
Right. Is it Carol, his sister?
Asking the wrong person.
I've seen him talk to his sister, and they both speak as if they've lived in Scotland their entire lives.
Yeah, and that was it. He was literally just sat there, and it's just like, John Barrowman is Scottish? Or John Barrowman, or no, in fact, it's not even that. It was like, why is John Barrowman putting on a Scottish accent? And actually quite a good one at that. And that's when I found out that basically, no, he is actually, born in Scotland, and he literally just chops and changes.
You can flip in and out. Yeah.
If he's with his family, he's Scottish. If he's with anyone else, he goes back to that sort of almost generic American accent that he had. But Rosé, very similar. Completely American, not even particularly New York. I think. I mean, there are I think elements.
Yeah, it's
of
not
it,
that coffee. It's not that one, is it?
No,
it's like
coffee. But you think absolutely American, and I think she did a Scottish character. This was before the current one, and it's just like, my God, that's a really good Scottish accent. And that's when you then find out she's actually originally from Scotland. For like, I think she left when she was like 4 or something. But she did Mary Queen of Scots in Snatch Game, and she puts on basically a Michelle Gomez-esque Glaswegian fucking stab you type junkie sort of accent. And then you got Candy Muse, who's basically going, what the fuck is she coming out with this Irish accent for?
No, hang on. But she didn't even say Irish accent. She called it an Ireland accent.
It was.
She said she's doing an Ireland accent.
Was it?
Yeah. And I was like, firstly, it's Scottish. Secondly, it would be Irish accent. You fucking spoon.
But I think there's always going to be an element of that as well. I think especially with regional accents, in that you will get a lot of, and it's the running joke, sort of Americans are really bad at spotting different types of British accent, whether it's Scottish, Irish, and then all of the regional variations therein. And like the fact that people think there is a Scottish accent, there isn't any more than there is an English accent. It depends on what part of Scotland you're from, what part.
I used to get this all the time when I worked in radio. People say, "Can I have a Welsh accent on it?" And I'd be like, "Brilliant. Do you want Cardiff? Do you want Newport? Do you want Swansea?
Yeah.
Do you want West Wales? Do you want the valleys? In which case, if you want the valleys, do you want it kind of more Rumney Valley or do you want it more Rhondda Valley? Do you want it to sound sort of Aberystwyth? What about Ceredigion? What about sort of that Wrexham sort of doesn't really even sound that Welsh accent? Or we could go Rill, which is kind of somewhere between Welsh and borderline Scouse when I listen to it. I get told off for that a lot, but that's what it sounds like to me. Or go right up for that banger on Anglesey, real nasal clipped. Which one would you like, dear client? And they look at you and go,
we want Welsh.
Because then it's like, brilliant. So are you appealing to customers in Swansea? Yeah. Right, so don't put a Newport accent on it then.
So I think there's always going to be an element of that, because again, I've had a similar thing where I've watched like certain American shows, and there'll be an accent. I go, that accent's fucking ridiculous, and it turns out it's actually an amazingly authentic regional accent for that particular part of Kentucky or wherever it's based.
They're genuinely from there. Oh
yeah.
Oh bugger.
And it's just like, ooh, because I thought that was a really weird put on accent. So I think there's always going to be that element to it. But I think equally as well, you can't use that excuse to sort of say that, well, because of that, it doesn't matter who you actually cut. And I think that's an excuse certainly a lot of sort of animation and voice work sort of productions have hidden behind, which is, you're casting the voice, not the ethnicity or not the actor. And I think that does a massive disservice. Because if you're casting something that's very clearly an Asian-inspired sort of setting, there's actually no reason not to use sort of actors who identify with that ethnicity.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The flip side of that coin, right? And I always say this, and there's no easy answer to it, and it just starts arguments, but I'm going to say it anyway, is under the same rule, you cannot cast a gay actor in a straight role. And that's a big no-no. You can't say that. Well, I think you can't have it both ways. It's just that there needs to be more gay roles. That's the problem. The problem's in the writing, not actually in the casting. There needs to be more gay roles that are more authentic and not, bloody Tom out of Gimme, Gimme, Gimme. Which, don't get me wrong, I love Gimme, Gimme, Gimme for what it is, but...
it's a stereotype.
But ultimately, not every gay man can be that character in every fucking thing that's ever written.
And shouldn't be.
No. So, I think that's where you muddy the water, is when then you get a lot of the same activists saying, "Oh no, you can't not cast them in something just because they're gay." Well, make your mind up, bitch. That's my thought on that. And I know it's an unpopular thought, but that's how I feel about it. So yeah, Disney. Ultimately, it's a good film. It's a really lovely sit down with the family, feel good film. There's lots to enjoy about it, and it's it is not up there with one of the Disneys you'll watch over and over and over. I wouldn't have thought, but I think it is.
It's one of them.
It's above average
For me. It's one of the probably the more solid entries. I say it hits all the right comedic beats. Yes, it is a very good family movie. There is enough in there for the adults as well. It doesn't reach the heights of Frozen in terms of speaking bits. I mean, for me, I'm always going to have a preference for Disney animation that doesn't have songs in it because that's just me. I'm not a huge fan of musicals generally. He absolutely is. But I think it's definitely one of their sort of better sort of movies. Yeah, go and see it.